Chapter 11. Silver let the soldier step through the shimmering barrier first. Gentry straightened his back, but before he could move to follow, Silver slipped past him and through the threshold to the slim dry patch of ground that marked the road from the way station. She was covered in the melancholy sensation limbo pressed on anyone not protected by clarity wards. She felt as if she were alone. Even if the two people she could arguably call her best friends were close enough to touch, she was supposed to activate the runic bracelet to lessen the effect. She chose not to. It was jarring, but comforting. The sensation of isolation told her brain that she didn't have to endure the awkwardness of eye contact, that she didn't have to feign the social rituals her mother spent years teaching her to imitate. The soldier, Jaden, as he had offered with disinterest, looked to her for direction on where to scout possible locations for their entrenchment. She hadn't realized that her rush to end the anxiety of waiting had placed the burden of decision on her. Gentry couldn't hide his surprised scowl, but Silver heard him release a resigned sigh as she turned her attention to the moors. Good. He'll be fine. The land ringing the way station was clear of debris and rubble, the Aegis preferring clean sightlines for any unexpected large groups of hellspawn. She tracked the puddles and muddy clumps of grass to the area where the detritus of limbo began. Scrubby trees that more resembled tall bushes dotted the space between crumbling structures. Steeples rose above buildings, pocked by ruined, colorful windows, where the stone walls hadn't completely fallen to ruin. Silver noticed that one building stood intact, if heavily weathered. 3 other groups huddled to debate their next steps, so she loudly announced her intentions before someone else could claim the same building. "We go there," she told Jaden, pointing at the building. She started walking before her group could respond. Jaden shrugged and followed her. "Silver, you can't just order us around," Gentry said, shuffling to catch up to her. "I wasn't trying to," she said. "The other groups are still debating on where to go. If we choose somewhere close, it gives us more time to fortify. I think I sense some old wards on that chapel. If we can get them going, it will save time and put us in a superior defensive position." Reiner cracked a grin and nodded. Happy Silver seemed to have thought it through before announcing her intention. Gentry's expression remained concerned. "You're right," Gentry said. "We may have an advantage because we moved quickly. But they may have an advantage because their team trusts each other. If one of us needs to lead, fine. We all know you're smart, Silver. Reiner and I would be happy to back you up, but you make sure your team is following before you run out in front, or you may find yourself isolated in a dangerous position." Silver tried to work through his objection. She was used to not understanding, but this time she could see that she would have to adapt. Usually, when she was confused by how someone felt, she could just ignore it. That was her preference. This time, though, she knew that wouldn't work. She needed her friends. But how? What did he want? Was he mad because he wanted to be the leader? If so, she should act submissively toward him. He didn't seem like that was what he wanted, though. Could he be worried about what Dornemann thought of him? Maybe she could lie. Tell him that Dornemann thought that his rune work had improved, despite his lackluster start. "No, I'm sorry," she said. "I just get distracted sometimes." Gentry smiled at her. "We know. Thank you. Lead on." Silver nodded and quickened her pace toward the embankment. She was knocked to the ground. She pressed herself up from the hard-packed road to see Jaden standing over her, with his pike extended through the dissipating form of a wraith. "If you children could please focus more on your surroundings, and less on your schoolyard squabbles, I will have a much better chance of not being reprimanded for one of you being killed." Gentry reached down to help her up, his eyes scanning the area around them. He was probably scolding himself for not protecting her. Silver hid her smile under annoyance as she scooped the shard from the ground. 19 to go. They took the road from the way station to just where the land had been cleared and headed north, off the path toward her target. The next wraith that attacked received a blast of resonance from Reiner's palm, forcing it back. Gentry capitalized on the opening by stepping forward and sending resonance through his lunge, flying 6 feet and extending his sword through the wraith. They all winced at its scream as it died, but smiled at the shard that fell beneath it. They were making good progress, but they all felt the urgency of making it to shelter, as the attacks would only increase as they went. Gentry and Reiner bumped fists, sending a pang of concern down Silva's neck. She would need to make sure to prove she belonged, once the runework began. As they approached, the steeple loomed 4 stories tall. It rose resolutely above the squat chapel beneath. Silva thought this was foolish. Why someone would build a 4-story tower when the main building only stood 15 feet tall was beyond her. The pride of the gods, certainly. All of the ruins in Limbo depicted the 6 deities of Telnira in one way or another, but the symbolism shown in what remained of the stained glass windows was decidedly more sanguine than the jaded relationship her people currently shared with their deities. Silva had never met a god, so, if they existed, they didn't have a meaningful impact on her life, so she mostly ignored them. The doorway to the chapel was open. Silva peered inside at the dirt and debris that marred the once beautiful interior. The remains of stone pews gave her a clue at how the building was originally arranged, though their state revealed the damage time. The wall stones bore weathered, swirling runic patterns that flowed along the walls, leading to a small nook at the back of the room. The metal inlaid patterns continued through the stained glass windows, most of which remained intact. Silva marveled at the craftsmanship. The modern method of runesmithing favored speed over longevity, so the classic art of metal inlay was rare and reserved for private commissions. Gentry and Jaden, can you scout for the closest supply cache? We will need ward wire to patch the broken windows. The breaks in the walls can be carved, but we will have to hardwire the windows, Silva said, already running her hands over the stones, tracing the faint carvings. I will mark the anchor points for Reiner so we can hopefully activate the building's network. Jaden grunted. The boy can go scouting. I will need to guard the 2 of you. I've already seen his swordsmanship. He can handle himself. Gentry beamed at the acknowledgement, looking for a reaction from Silva, but she had already lost herself following the lines, trying to make sense of the original runesmith's intent. The methods were foreign to her. Archaic, like reading a book written 500 years earlier. The words may be familiar, but stylized in a way that blurred the meaning. Silva did her best to connect broken points on one side of each window to their counterparts on the other. Continuing the story the original artisan was trying to tell, anxiety bubbled under her calm demeanor. She knew her efforts fell short. She would be ecstatic if she could just get the network to fire up. The efficiency would be horrible, and the shards they earned on the way wouldn't be enough to power the network for more than an hour. She would need to implement a lure system. If she could leak some of the wasted essence into the air, it might bring in enough wraiths to kill and harvest more shards than the wards burned. She mapped and marked the pathways, and Reiner followed, setting anchors as she worked. As she finished the last window, she noticed Gentry had returned, and was almost halfway through securing wire across Reiner's anchors. Silva set the first shard into the power nexus at the front of the building, and walked to the back to set the second. She would know the moment the second shard clicked into its housing if her modifications and repairs would be enough for the network to activate. If this didn't work, the gamble they had taken on the building would have wasted materials and time they needed to stand out. Dawnman hadn't said that this was a competition, but in the 103, everything was measured and remembered. You didn't get a ribbon if you returned with 25 or 30 shards, but Dorneman was famous for his mental ledgers. Someone who tested the highest in the class could fail if he didn't think they performed well enough in the practical application of their craft. Of course, wartime scenarios like this didn't have as great an impact on Silva's path as it would Gentry's. She wasn't destined for the front lines after all. Once Gentry and Jaden finished their work, Silva knelt behind the raised dais at the front of the chapel. The runic controls were a simple set of granite keystones that connected the various networks to the main shard. Once the circuit was complete, the runes would power up, and the effect resulting from the runic pattern would manifest, for good or for ill. She took a deep breath, mentally picturing all of the circuits and double-checking every repair she made. Her eyebrows pinched as a specific place in her mental picture gave her a bad feeling. She stood and rushed over to a wall, dragging an empty ward wire spool behind her. She stood atop it and looked closely at one of the stones, where moss covered a small corner. She brushed the moss away, revealing a scorch mark. "What are you doing?" "You've already checked everything twice," Raina complained. "Saving our lives, Raina," Silva said. "I think this was the original point of failure for this building. Look at how it burned out. Hand me a chisel." Rena complied silently, her expression showing that she at least partially understood the implications. If Silva had powered up the network, this type of break would have caused an essence arc across the circuit. Anyone touching the runes or standing near the break would be burned by the escaping power. They might survive, they might not. When she was finished, Silva returned to the runic controls and secured the shard in the housing. She pressed in 5 of the keystones, one by one. 2 gave no response, but glowing lines from the 3 that activated lit up the walls. She held the last keystone in her hand, giving the protective runes time to stabilize. The last keystone would power up her lure, bleeding the waste from the other circuits through ward wire to a spot just inside the main door of the chapel. It would release pulses of essence that would draw Hellspawn to the front door, where she had strengthened the wards to handle a rush of wraiths. If it worked like she intended, their momentum paired with the concentrated barrier would kill the wraiths and send the shards just inside the doorway, where they could be collected. "Is everyone ready?" Silva asked. "Ready for what?" Gentry asked slowly. "I built a lure. Powering this chapel is going to cost more than we earn if we don't draw the wraiths to us. They will attack the doorway and the wards will disintegrate them. Also, the other students won't get any shards until we are already finished. Just be ready to collect the shards." "I don't like it," Jaden said. "This isn't the assignment, and it sounds risky." This earned a nod from her teammates. Silva sighed. "If you don't agree, we won't do it. But look at the wards around you. We may be in our first year of training, but how many years did the smiths that built this have? Does it look like they will hold?" They looked around, but said nothing. "All right, fine. Start rolling up the ward wire. We will make an encampment against the outside wall and take it slow." "But we already did all this work," Raina complained. "I know," Silva said. "It's unfortunate, but better safe than sorry. You're right. We wasted some time, but I can't do it without you." Even Jaden looked dismayed at the thought of starting over. "Are you sure the wards will hold?" Gentry asked. "No wraith is breaking through these," Silva said confidently. "The stones themselves would have to be knocked over. Even a drifter would have trouble with that. Plus, the lure is also a weapon. If I overload it, then it will send a burst of essence out at head level that will kill just about anything. It will burn all the shards inside the ward line to do it, but anything caught above the line will be reduced to ash." Jaden grunted in agreement, finally swaying the other 2. Silva didn't even try to hide her smile. "This would be fun." "Fine. But if I say it's pulling too much attention, you pull that keystone, all right?" "Deal," Silva said. "Ready?" 3 nods. Silva pressed the keystone into the circuit for the lure, and they all waited. Then wraiths began screaming from every direction.